Hello out there to all you IHB believers. Yeah, we're going back to Believers because we have a little bit of a different show for you today. Little different of a setup, and we're keeping our fingers crossed and we're praying that it works. So we need you all to believe in us. As Jimmy is not currently even sitting next to me, we're recording from location. He is live in Las Vegas with several of the Cavs players, and we're doing this via phone call.
J.R. Smith is having a great time.
Well, without further ado, hello, my name is Dominic DeMore, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to the second best thing you will hear all week. We have a great show for you today that includes not one, but two top-notch film reviews, as well as the box office results for last week. This is the I've Had Better Movies podcast, and as always, my co-host James is on the other end of the phone call. Let's kick it off.
Well, this week, Dom and I have two separate movie reviews to give you. The first one is Finding Dory and Central Intelligence is the next one. Dom, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll go first. So I saw Finding Dory. I drew the child-sized straw this week. Jimmy's the one with the young, less than 10-year-old nephew, and somehow I'm the one who ends up seeing Finding Dory.
Hey, I'm pretty sure you went with two adults
that
are 24 plus.
That is very true.
That's on you.
In the theater that I saw it in, though, there was like 47% adult, which is impressive for a movie this size. So, let's kick it right off. So, based on the original film, Finding Nemo, from 13 years ago. Oof. This story follows a similar premise. Right, so this time it is Dory who gets lost. As she finally remembers something, she remembers a bit of tidbits from her past and her childhood, and realizes that she does have a family out there. So Nemo, is Dory she? I mean, she's played by Ellen, but you know.
Yeah, she's played by Ellen.
Yeah, so toss a coin up and say she's a female. But Dory is
I'm pretty sure Dory's a feminine name.
Yeah, could go back and forth. I do know a woman named Dory, so yeah, we'll go with female. Dory, Nemo, and Marlin have to set out on an adventure to find Dory's parents. Just from the beginning, just one of my positives is visually it was a stunning movie. I did see it in 3D. There are definitely aspects of the movie that are worth it to see in 3D. The scenes in the ocean with the blue water and all the colors, those are really amazing. But there are other scenes where I kind of question the decision making. You had these beautiful underwater moments early on, and then you kind of got these green murky waters. And granted, at the beginning of the movie you start out in essentially Australia, like in the reefs and coral, and the majority of the movie takes place in California, Northern California even, so there's like green water and things like that, and it's not quite as blue. And I get why you did it, because I'm sure in real life that's the way it is, but it just didn't make sense to me for the movie. It wasn't nearly as beautiful as in certain points, and it kind of distracted me a little bit. Yeah,
it's kind of one of those things that it's probably not worth it for them to do, but they did it anyway to try and be more accurate.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and they ignore physics. Here we go. I'm talking about movies ignoring physics again, and even worse, this one's an actual animated movie. But there's several times where they just like straight up ignore physics in the movie, to where like they have a coffee pot filled with water with Dory inside of it. A giant squid then jumps into the coffee pot full of water to hide from a human, jumps back out, and then there's the same amount of water in the coffee pot as before the octopus jumped in. So you leave stuff like that in, but the idea that like, oh, we can't make California waters blue, it felt weird, and it made some of the moments in the movie not as emotional. Speaking of ignoring or kind of shying away from things, the movie also had this potential to take on a higher meaning, aka could have sent a better message. Like James and I both saw Zootopia this year. It's one of my top films of the year, James. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
Yeah, so that movie did a wonderful job of not only presenting an entertaining film for young children and the adults who were going to see it, but it also gave a pretty decent message for the young kids going out there in a very subtle way, where it was about not judging somebody by their ancestry and biology and how they look, and instead just taking them for who they are. And I felt like this movie had an opportunity to do, well, not that same message, but at one point, Dory gets caught inside of a I don't really know what they're called, but the plastic rings that come with soda cans.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do those actually have a name?
I don't know. I mean, the little plastic ends on on your tennis shoe laces have names, so I assume those things have names.
That's true. Maybe that's something I should look up.
Yeah. So while James does that, so she gets caught in this, and they kind of make a joke out of it at the start, like she's just kind of there, but they never really draw attention to it. And then that's how she eventually gets scooped out of the water and kind of taken because somebody rescues her. But they never mention the idea of pollution or saving the oceans or taking these beautiful underwater worlds and preserving them. Instead, they just kind of go back to the old tried and true, family is what you make it, and you can always find your way home.
6-pack rings or 6-pack yolks?
Oh, so it's a yoke. Interesting.
A yoke. Who knew?
Yeah, exactly. So they kind of dropped the ball there for me. A few more negatives. Believe it or not, I actually didn't hate the movie. I feel like I say that every week as I torch these movies. But Dory's a tough character to focus a film around. With her common or trait that everybody knows of her being forgetful. The first 4 times that you make a joke in a movie about her forgetting something that a character just said, sure, we'll say it works, but the next 8 times that you do it, it kind of gets a little much. That's one of those great for young kids. They probably laugh every time, but if you're above the age of 8, it's like, oh crap, they did that again.
Yeah, I get that. It makes sense.
Yeah. Continuing along those lines, Nemo plays a larger role in this film. That bothered me. He's a child actor. I didn't feel that the character was very necessary. It lost a bit of that Marlin and Dory from the first film feel. They were supposed to be the new people looking for them, but they were such a small side character, and Nemo just came across as like, hey, your dad came across the ocean to find you too, not only just Dory. So that just bothered me a little bit. And if you read my review online, you'll be able to see my feelings on the child actor who voiced him. Spoilers, I don't know who it is, and then I go on a little tirade about child voice actors.
Do you think there's a different character they could have used in the sequel to Finding Nemo, other than Dory? That would have made it a better movie?
To be honest, kind of. You would have had to change the story fundamentally, but realistically, I think they could have focused on, granted, this is a little heady for a kid's movie, but you could have focused on Marlin, the Albert Brooks voiced fish, the other main character of the first film, the father fish, and maybe like his and a potential new love interest, I guess, like kind of like him getting back out there in the world, and maybe she goes missing.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been a bad play for them because, you know, it came out 13 years later, and at that point, if you're 10, you're 23 at that point, so that kind of makes sense to follow your age group.
Yeah, that's the other part that bothered me. I'm glad you brought that up because, okay, real time, the movie takes place 13 years later. In movie time, it takes place like 6 months to a year later, and this bothered the hell out of me because Nemo is roughly the same size and age. It's a small thing, but like they're fish. They mature very quickly. I'm pretty sure that Nemo would be roughly the same size and older than as much like not quite the age of Marlin, but like mid-teenager to young adult fish style. So just something that stuck with me that was like, oh, you guys just kind of really are just doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, that's a shame. They're everything always happens that way. They just try and do the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And they're less creative. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, can you really blame them? Because as we'll talk about later, this movie did insane money at the box office.
I know.
But to bring it back down to earth, it was lacking in some ways. Like I said, Dory's a tough character to base the movie around. When she's not on screen, I feel that the movie has a certain uptick. It's more interesting. They don't fall back on the same done-over jokes so much. But there's no real memorable moments in this movie. Like the first one, James will know he dated a lot of girls in high school, and every single one of them would just chant over and over, P. Sherman, 34, Wallaby Lane, Sydney, Australia, or whatever that thing is. Or just keep swimming, or fish are friends, not food. This movie doesn't have any of those nice catchphrases or cool moments to where you're like, 5 years from now, I'm going to think back about Finding Dory, and really there's only 2 standouts, but for the most part, it felt lacking in that way.
Yeah. What were your 2 standouts?
Actually, James, you'll really like these standouts. In the film, there are 2 sea lions that are in a rock outside of Fish Institute where Dory is taken yet saved, and that she has to be rescued from, essentially. And that's the part you're going to like, because they were voiced by Idris Elba and Dominic West, 2 veteran actors. Yes, exactly. Jim's favorite TV show, 2 of the most, I'd say, iconic characters from the show, the most memorable, and it's a very dark show, yet they show up together in this Pixar animated movie.
It's amazing.
Yeah, for those in on the joke and who knew that about Idris Elba as Stringer Bell and Dominic West as McNulty.
Cool stuff. I love it.
Yeah, so that was my favorite part of the film.
Yeah, The Wire still doesn't get enough attention, and hopefully this will help some of it. Yeah. Probably not. Only true fans will actually know this.
Exactly.
It's worth a shot.
Yeah. All right, so that was my positive. One more negative I'm going to touch on really quick. I think another thing that might have brought the film down, and this is going to be weird to say with how popular she is, but I think Ellen DeGeneres doesn't quite have the talent / vocal range to pull off some of the more dramatic moments.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, her acting list isn't that long, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, she was early 90s, she blew up, but that was all mainly like comedy stuff. And she hasn't really had a dramatic role. And then she got the TV show, which, I mean, took her into the stratosphere and then Finding Dory, of course. But like in the first film, Albert Brooks supplies all the real emotion. Like, he's got the vocal range that you know when he's sad, you know when he's overjoyed, you feel every time that he says something mean and stuff like that. Whereas in this film with Dory, she has moments where it's like, oh, tugging at my heartstrings because she was lost as a child and all she wants to do is remember, but she can't get anything right. And she tries to pull that emotion through. I don't think it ever connected with me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But it was a fun film. It's not quite as memorable as the first. Overall, I don't think I wasted my money going to see it. But it's going to end up being a middle-of-the-pack Pixar movie. Arguably one of their worst. Like, I don't think it's bad. Well, not bad, because Pixar doesn't really make bad movies. But as uninteresting as something like The Good Dinosaur. But overall, for my rating, I gave it 6.5 out of 10 apples.
6.5? How about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's fresh on the tomato meter, which I think the movie's sitting at like 94% right now on Rotten Tomatoes. So that falls in line with that. But overall, as you all heard from my predictions last week, I didn't think this movie was going to make that much money. And it turns out I was wrong. Nostalgia is a real bitch.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I wasn't even that close either.
Well, you were about 15 million closer than I was.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I just didn't think, they had that following as they did with the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently I was wrong.
I think we all were. All right, James. So that was my review of Finding Dory. You can read my full review, goes into a bit more detail and talks about some points that I wasn't able to talk to you about here on the website. That's www.ihbpodcast.com, or check us out on Facebook. We post all of the links and everything to the website, and you can see direct articles from there. That is the I've Had Better podcast page. All right, James. How would you drop some knowledge on us about the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Kevin Hart comedy buddy spy, just overall awesomeness of Central Intelligence?
Well, let's start off with the wonderful tag that they have for the film: a little heart and a Big John.
It was a good marketing plan.
I love saying it. It just fits so well. But it was a pretty decent movie. It had some good points and some questionable points. But basically, the plot is Kevin Hart reunites with an old classmate through Facebook, and Kevin Hart is a mild-mannered accountant lured into the world of international espionage, and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, works for the CIA. So it's basically kind of revolves entirely around their high school reunion, and that's kind of really the gist of it, other than a few CIA fight scenes and kind of the world's going to end type of stuff.
Yeah, so Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson needs Hart for something? That's the impression I got from the trailers. Or
yes.
Is that just kind of something to draw you in? Is that an actual main plot point?
Yeah, basically, The Rock needs Kevin Hart because of his international accounting skills. Bit of a stretch, but he apparently is able to hack into some black market chips or for CIA information that these people have that's going to go on to auction.
Interesting.
It's a bit of a stretch, the CIA part of the story.
Gotcha.
But they sort of made it work, I guess.
Yeah. What do you want to do? You want to go positives first or negatives?
Let's go negatives first.
All right, let's have them.
Let's start with Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart plays the same character in just about every movie. He was the same in Ride Along, as I'm sure he was the same in Ride Along 2. It's kind of that little guy that is in shock and tends to scream the most of the movie and just blurt crazy dialogue that doesn't make any sense, but somehow it seems to make people laugh. I kind of judge that as a negative. Some people might think that's a positive because they really like Kevin Hart when he does that.
Mm-hmm. But eventually, the shtick will run out. Like, he's going to have to start expanding soon.
Yeah, he's going to have to do something different. And I felt like The Rock tried a little bit too hard. I just felt like some of his jokes were rushed. The timing wasn't completely right. And I don't know if that's just because of the writing or him versus Kevin Hart. I don't know how to say this, but Kevin Hart talks fast, and The Rock doesn't really do that. I mean, he tried to at points, and I guess it kind of worked, but it just didn't really flow.
Yeah, like, I mean, when you have somebody who can, I assume, like, improv and just go off the cusp and create magic like Kevin Hart can, it's got to be both a fun challenge for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but, like, when it's not clicking, I'm sure it stands out.
Yeah. There were some funny points in the film. Honestly, I can't really think of any good one-liners. They were all kind of just a run-of-the-mill jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Some worked and some didn't. The action was okay. There were some people that I wasn't expecting to be in the film.
That's something I wanted to talk to you about. From the trailers, I know nobody else who's in this movie, and because I haven't looked it up on IMDb or anything, aside from Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson. Like, who's the big bad guy? Like, is there one big bad guy?
Well, the big bad guy you don't see until the end.
Okay. So spoilers, heads up.
He's not even the bad guy that you think he is at that point.
Oh.
So Aaron Paul is also in this movie. He has a short role, and he plays something a little bit different than his typical role, like his Breaking Bad character. Not him at all.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one funny part in the movie where he does say bitch, and he timed it up perfectly, and he says it the same way he did in Breaking Bad. And then Jason Bateman was actually in this movie as well.
Really?
And yeah, and he was actually really good because he didn't play the typical Jason Bateman. He wasn't that nice guy that is confused or gets stuck in trouble or has to get himself out of some situation. So that was a nice change of pace for me. Those would be some of my positives because it was nice seeing those guys in there, and I had no idea they were in the movie because the trailers didn't give it away.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta respect the marketing campaign for that, or at least respect the strength of Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson that you needed to show nobody else.
Yeah, exactly. a good thing for Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, you just need those two in a trailer, and people go see your movie.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it made a solid chunk at the box office, which, again, we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I got two more things real quick. I thought this movie actually did a really good job of differentiating between the trailers and the actual movie itself. They showed enough in the trailers to make you want to see the movie and laugh, and then they still left out points. So when you actually saw the trailer scenes in the movie, it worked. There's still parts of it you didn't know, which not a lot of films do right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other point is I kind of enjoyed the end credits more than the entire film. When it was Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart messing up lines or just working together, that seemed more funny to me than the actual movie.
Were they additional type scenes, or were they actually bloopers?
They were like bloopers.
Oh, that's awesome. Not enough movies do that nowadays.
Yeah. At least I'm pretty sure they were bloopers. I don't think they did any of that stuff on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, because the movie wasn't what I expected, I don't know if that was just my mindset or if I was expecting a lot more from these two, but I'm going to go with a 5 on a scale of 1 to Good Will Hunting.
Middle of the road.
It was just another middle-of-the-pack film that didn't really stand out and didn't do anything that crazy.
All right, James. That was a great review. You did bury the lead a little bit, though, because I know who you saw the movie with, and did Nora laugh?
Oh, I forgot about that. I'm glad you mentioned that. My mother has a very difficult sense of humor, and there were points that she did laugh. So I commend at least them, at the writers and directors, and Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson, for being able to make my mom laugh.
That's awesome. And now you all on the who listen to the IHB podcast can look forward to a new segment we'll have every time we get to get Jimmy's mom out to the theater. Did Nora laugh, or did Nora like it?
Yeah.
All right. If you guys want to read more of our reviews, as I've said before, you can check out our website, www.ihbpodcast. Or if you saw either of the films we did, Finding Dory or Central Intelligence, you can hit us up on Twitter and let us know what you thought of the films on your scale of 1 to Good Will Hunting. Just go ahead and use hashtag IHBmovies, or just drop us a direct tweet or a Facebook comment to the I've Had Better podcast page. And the Twitter is at ihbpodcast. Next up, we have the Box Office Battle, a competition for bragging rights between friends who want nothing more than to prove they know more than the other guy, and who buys the first round of drinks this week, of course. How the game works is each week, James and I will predict the top 5 films at the box office, and whoever gets closest to the correct order wins the point for this week. Now, this box office was a little different because James and I actually both picked the same box office, and I'm 90% sure we went 5 for 5. I didn't double check that, but if you wanted,
we did.
Oh, we did.
We're
nice. Good. Yeah. However, we bet on the amount of money Finding Dory would make, and while both of us were epically wrong, one of us was more so, and that would be me. I dramatically undersold Finding Dory. I think I guessed only $65 million. James, slightly better, guessed 80. And as Jimmy's about to tell us, and probably gloat all the way about how he has now tied the score back up, Finding Dory did much better than that.
Hey, just, I'm not a gloater. It was a good guess. You tried your hardest, and I just did better.
Yeah, well, that's why you're in Vegas this week. You're celebrating the win.
That's right. Last week's box office results are: taking the number 1 spot and setting records along the way was the apparently highly anticipated sequel, Finding Dory, taking in $136.2 million in its opening weekend. Also debuting this weekend was the Kevin Hart, Dwayne Johnson comedy Central Intelligence, which took in $34.5 million. Last week's winner, The Conjuring 2, fell to the 3rd spot, taking in $15.6 million in its second week. In the 4th place, we had Now You See Me 2, taking in additional $9.7 million. And finally, rounding out the top 5, one of the most confusing successes yet failures of all time was Warcraft, dropping 73% in its second week, earning only $6.5 million.
Yeah, pretty insane week, realistically. Box office records were shattered. Some movies just straight up bombed in their second week. And then there was a movie like Central Intelligence, which, I mean, it didn't blow anybody away, but 34.5? That's a really good number for a comedy. I mean, you can't hope for much more than that.
Just off the top of your head, do you know any other comedies their opening weekend?
For example, Ride Along 2. Not Ride Along 2. Ride Along 2, I think did similar numbers. But Ride Along with Kevin Hart and Ice Cube opened up to similar numbers and had a decent run. And realistically, with 34, it wouldn't be surprising to see Central Intelligence do over $100 million domestically. And considering it's only, $50 million budget? That's solid money.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Yeah, so that was impressive. But, man, for the most part, like, other comedies, like, if you are in that $40 million range, you're going to be okay. I think, like, the first Neighbors did around there. Might have done a little bit more, but, like, that's what you're going for. Especially with those kind of movies, the budgets are low enough. Like, $50 million is a lot for a comedy, but it's not the $200 million of Finding Dory. So, continuing on those, just to give you guys some back. I said that records were shattered. I meant it. Finding Dory became the highest opening animated film of all time. It beat the previous record by $15 million. James, I will give you 10 box office showdown points if you can name me what's number 2.
Zootopia?
Nope, not even close. Number 2 is Shrek the Third.
Oh.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gotten that one.
Yeah, no, that's nuts. Like, I never think about Shrek the Third, but it up until this week, highest opening weekend for an animated film ever.
I thought the first one was so much better.
So did I. I thought the first 2 were better.
Yeah, the third was just a throwaway film.
Yeah. There was a fourth one too, wasn't there?
Probably.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. A few more notes on Finding Dory. Almost double the original film's debut. Finding Nemo opened to like 70.3, 73, something like that. $200 million budget for this film, which is kind of insane. I mean, animated movies take a long time, and there's a lot of people that go into it, but $200 million on an animated movie.
Yeah, a lot of money.
It's up to $184 million worldwide, which is pretty impressive altogether. I wouldn't be surprised if this movie does like $500 million in the next like couple weeks or so. I'm not sure if it's opened everywhere yet, but it's gonna make its money back, that for sure. Even a 50% drop off, you're gonna be $70 million opening next weekend. 60.
Yeah.
Central Intelligence is currently at a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's up to $42 million globally, which, as we previously mentioned, $50 million budget. That's solid in its opening week. Conjuring 2, the first place from last week, dropped off 63%. I was not expecting that much. I was expecting closer to 50. The first one dropped off only 46% in its next week. And they're comparable on Rotten Tomatoes. I think both are around the 75 to 77% range. But the movie's done $71 million domestically. So to me, that says people are going during the middle of the week to see this movie. Like, it did almost $15 million from Monday to Friday, or Monday to Thursday, really? That's pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, not that many people actually go to the theater on the weekdays.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you're willing to get the shit scared out of you more during the week than you are on the weekends.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Tough to get a job with the lights on, so nobody likes to see scary movies on the weekend.
I really hope you edit that out.
I might leave that one in. I might throw another beep in there. Just gonna beep the word Blazo.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah, but I mean, again, Conjuring already up to $188 million globally on a $40 million budget, so I think they're pretty happy either way. Then you got Now You See Me 2 coming in with the 4th spot. Made $90 million globally. Their budget was roughly $90 million. They're probably not too excited about that stuff, and they wish they would have had more of a drop-off like the first one had, which was only 35% from its opening week to its second week. But hey, as James and I talked about, it's a sequel that probably didn't need to be made. But aside from Finding Dory, the big story of the week, Warcraft. The movie James and I reviewed last week dropped off nearly 73% from week 1 to week 2.
It's pretty high.
It is. And, it's not that we haven't seen those numbers before. Batman vs. Superman, for the record, dropped off 60-something. But the difference is that movie dropped off from 160-odd million, I think it was 150-odd million, to 50-something million, 60-something million. Warcraft debuted to just over 24 million. So that far of a drop means you only made $6.5 million. That is insane.
Just embarrassing.
Third biggest drop of all time. Compare the other two were Friday the 13th remake that dropped off 80%, and 50 Shades of Grey, Jim's third favorite movie, dropped off 74%.
I don't think it was my third.
I think I've heard you talk about it several times. But the weirdest thing about Warcraft, though, is despite the fact that it's practically bombing here in America, doing bank overseas. Only 10% of this movie's global gross comes from the United States. It's currently at $378 million worldwide and over $200 million alone in China. James, what are the Chinese people thinking? Neither one of us love this movie that much.
I don't know. They had to have loved it, right?
Clearly, you don't spend $200 million. China is a growing market, but Jesus.
Yeah. Maybe they all play Warcraft over there.
It's definitely possible. It's a popular game. But so those are the results for this week. How about we go into our picks for next week? James, drop your picks.
All right. I'm going to start off with Finding Dory, of course, being number 1 again, because I don't think Independence Day 2 is going to be able to, take that down off the throne. If it had Will Smith, it might have a chance, but it does not. Number 2, Independence Day 2. Number 3, Central Intelligence. And I think this is where we differ. I'm going to take The Free State of Jones with Matthew McConaughey at number 4. And then I really don't want to do this, but I think The Shallows might actually break the top 5.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a tough decision for me too. I have a similar list to you. My first 3 are the same: Finding Dory, Independence Day Resurgence, and Central Intelligence. I did go The Shallows number 4. I think their marketing campaign's been a little, I hesitate to say better, but it's been out there more. You're going to pull in some people just because they want to see, as sad as it is, but they just want to see Blake Lively in a swimsuit.
Yeah, I'm one of those people.
A little bit, yeah. And then also, as weird as it is, you're going to get those Sharknado people who are just like, I really, 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 really like sharks.
Yeah, especially because Shark Week coming up soon.
Yeah, so
getting prepared for that. And the other thing is, Free State of Jones it's like an Oscar bait movie, but not released in the right time.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that worries me the most, because it's an Oscar bait movie released in the summer, and those very rarely ever do well.
I think with this movie coming out now, we'll really be able to see what Matthew McConaughey is made of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he's an actual movie star, or if he's just another actor.
Yeah, I agree. So those are our picks. Let us know what your top 5 picks are. You can hit us up on Twitter, on Facebook that I've already mentioned. All right, so I want to thank all of you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please like this episode and subscribe to the I've Had Better Podcast Network. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at IHB Podcast, and on Facebook, go like the I've Had Better Podcast page. James, tell the people where to find you and what casino you're hitting up this week.
Well, I am hitting up Mirage to start off with.
Nice.
And then I'll be going to Caesars.
Nice.
But you can find me on Twitter at _Kaiser_Soze, and on Facebook as Jimmy Langos. And don't forget to check out our website, www.ihbpodcast.com. And please subscribe and listen to our iTunes.
Yep, and you can find that by just going onto iTunes and searching IHB Podcast, IHB Movies, or just the I've Had Better Podcast. You can do all 3 of those. Also, don't forget to write us a review. It really helps, and if you give us 5 stars, that means more like we are to show up on somebody else's suggestions, so that always helps us out with the bottom line stuff. I am Dominic Damore. You can follow me on Twitter at Dom Damore, or on Facebook as Dominic Damore. James, how was the show this week?
I've had better.
Good night, everybody.